We'll get started in a minute. We're waiting on the Reverend. Good afternoon. Welcome to the South Carolina Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame induction ceremony for meritorious service. I'm Jim McCleary. I'm the administrator of the Hall of Fame, and on behalf of our staff, I want to welcome you here for attending this celebration we have of officers that we're going to induct into the Hall of Fame today for meritorious service. Through their dedication and resourcefulness, have had a dramatic impact on the law enforcement community in South Carolina. To get us started, I have Reverend Eric Skidmore from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Assistance Program. Let us pray. Our gracious God, in whom we live and move and have our being, we give you thanks this day for these meritorious service honorees, for their service, for their dedication, their commitment to the cause of justice. We've learned over the years that your justice, your cause, is our cause. Father, we pray that you will bless us this day. You'll bless the families that are here and the co-workers. Father, show us a way into the future that we continue to work for this cause of justice and righteousness all the days of our life. Hear this prayer, we pray in thy name. Amen. Thank you, Reverend Skidmore. The Hall of Fame is a division of the South Carolina Department of Public Safety. It was established in 1974 to honor law enforcement officers who were killed in the line of duty and to recognize officers who, through their careers and commitments, have made a significant impact on law enforcement in South Carolina. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the chairman of the Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame Advisory Committee, South Carolina Department of Public Safety Director, Robert Woods.
Thank you, Jim. Good afternoon. On behalf of the South Carolina Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame Advisory Committee, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Meritorious Service Induction Ceremony. I have the privilege of serving as chair of the advisory committee, and I'd like to recognize and welcome other members of the committee who are in attendance today. If you all would stand and be recognized. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our honorees, family, and friends who join us today. I also want to thank Chief Jackie Swindler and the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy for hosting this momentous event. Today we recognize 6 outstanding public servants who have distinguished themselves in their service to South Carolina law enforcement. Since 2018, 34 deserving officers, including today's inductees, have been inducted into the Hall of Fame in recognition of their leadership and excellence in serving our state. The criteria for meritorious service into the Hall of Fame are outlined in South Carolina Code of Laws. Any officer whose continued record of excellence over a period of years is manifestly outstanding may be elected to the South Carolina Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame by the Advisory Committee. To receive this award, nominees must have a proven record of excellence that is manifestly outstanding, especially to South Carolina law enforcement as a whole. They must have 25 years minimum of law enforcement service. The nominees can be nominated posthumously. The nominees cannot currently be employed by a law enforcement agency or have been employed in the past 5 years. These 6 exemplary law enforcement professionals that we recognize today have met and exceeded these standards, and in doing so have left a lasting imprint on South Carolina law enforcement and made our state a safer place to live, work, and raise our families. Their names will be permanently displayed in the South Carolina Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame. And now I'd like to welcome those representatives from the nominating departments and organizations to present the induction narrative and recognition. Thank you for your efforts in ensuring these law enforcement professionals receive their rightful place of honor for their dedicated service.
Thank you, Director Woods. For our first presentation, I'd like to call on SLED Chief Mark Keel.
Good afternoon. It is an honor for me this afternoon to represent and put John Leon Gasquet Jr.'s name forward the South Carolina Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame for meritorious service. Captain Gasquet joined SLED in 1950, working as a night desk clerk while attending the University of South Carolina for approximately 4 years while serving with the United States Air Force after college graduation in 1954. He spent his entire career with SLED. He was a third-generation law enforcement officer, the son of Marion County Sheriff J. Leon Gasquet and Myrtle Hood Gasquet. Commissioned as a state law enforcement officer in 1953, he worked his way up the ranks, having been appointed assistant director by Chief J.P. Strom in 1964. He remained in that position until his passing in 1986. Following the death of Captain Gasquet, Chief Strom stated, "He was my friend and an excellent law enforcement officer. All of SLED depended on his leadership and his ability to handle major breaking events and criminal investigations." Captain Gasquet was a very capable investigator, particularly in the field of arson and white-collar crime. One of the highlights of his career was a 2-year investigation of election fraud in 1980 Dillon County Democratic primary that resulted in the conviction of a state senator and 29 others on federal and state voting statutes. He was one of the principal investigators into the slayings of Sheriff Smith, who was kidnapped in Lexington County, and Deborah May Helmick, who was abducted in Richland County. The investigation resulted in the arrest of Larry Gene Bell. During his career, he mentored and developed many SLED employees. Carl B. Stokes, those of us know him as Pedro, who later became Chief of Police at the University of South Carolina Law Enforcement and Safety. Ben Thomas, former Assistant Director and Assistant Chief of SLED, and Debbie Hamilton, who's with us today and who continues to be my administrative assistant, my right hand. Believe it or not, she was Captain Gasquet's right hand as well, and she's been with me since 1994. I'm not going to tell y'all to do any figuring on age there, but I'm thank God to have her, and I know Captain Gasquet felt the same way. Carl Stokes said, "I took over a night desk clerk position at SLED in 1954 after Leon Gasquet. Subsequently, following Stokes' graduation from the University of South Carolina and Gasquet's service in the United States Air Force, They became agents at SLED. Stokes states, "I grew up with 4 brothers, but Gascoigne and I worked so close together that he became closer to me than any of my brothers. I know of no one who has ever worked at SLED that is more qualified for the Hall of Fame South Carolina than J. Leon Gascoigne." Stokes further recalls that Chief Strom was the lead person at many civil rights demonstrations throughout the state, and he and Captain Gascoigne set the plans in motion for all law enforcement agencies to protect the demonstrators. During this time, Captain Gascoigne's leadership ability clearly became apparent. Former SLED Assistant Chief Thomas states, "Captain Gascoigne was a leader who truly led from the front, who tried the best to be everywhere and everything to everybody. He was responsible for starting the first SLED SWAT team, and he led every SWAT call that the agency received. He was managing SLED's daily operations from headquarters during the day and led SWAT calls during the night and was back at the office the next morning. SLED was a smaller, leaner agency in the 1970s, with Chief Strom running point on legislative and budget matters, while Captain Gascoigne ran all the operations and oversaw every investigation. If any man was ever described as being married to his job, it was him. He believed strongly in training to the point where he worked with South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy to begin in-service classes for all sworn agents of SLED. Also, SLED grew and hired a number of younger agents, many of whom never policed. Gascoigne worked with Criminal Justice Academy to actually have basic certification for SLED. Assistant Chief Thomas recounted, "Captain Gascoigne led all civil rights security operations from marches to riots to the integration of schools and public colleges, including state efforts against the Klan. One thing for sure, if anyone harmed an agent in performance of his duty, Captain Gascoigne would lead a team of agents to arrest and rectify such offenses. Twice in the 1970s this took place. Once in Joanna, South Carolina, when another agent and I were jumped by a group during an undercover operation, and the other event was during the Darlington race where 3 agents were beating while working ABC violations in Florence. Both time agents ended up in the hospital. The next day, Captain Gascoigne took a large contingent of officers from SLED, the Highway Patrol, to both establishments, shut them down, arrested a number of individuals, and padlocked the doors. By the way, he was the first one through the doors. One business decided to file a suit against the division in civil court, and of course they lost. Captain Gascoigne was truly on duty 24/7, 365. He exuded leadership, and he demanded perfection and commitment from all. At his untimely passing, everyone in law enforcement who knew him, they knew his workaholic mentality. They said he worked himself to death. One example of which Thomas says he can substantiate came shortly before Captain Gascoigne's passing. The year was 1985. The governor and the state were to host a National Governors Conference in Hilton Head Island in the summer of 1986. This was the first for the state, and the success of it was crucial. Thomas further elaborated that Captain Gascoigne took the project on using him as his scribe and operational planner for him. For months while running the agency, running up and down the road with meetings on the island, he worked nonstop. In addition, he was also leading the agency's budget initiative at the legislature and working on a raise for SLED employees. 1986 came, and the conference went off with several hitches very few people ever knew about. And Captain Gascoigne really never slept during the whole week. A note here is to his leadership. When the conference concluded and all the operations were shut down, he did not release them to go home. Instead, he arranged for us to stay one more night. He hosted an appreciation supper, a frogmore stew for all of us that had worked the meeting, and personally thanked us all in a closing word before a blessing before the meal. The next day, he again showed his appreciation by setting up a golf outing for those who wanted to play golf before heading home. He cared deeply for us, and if those of you that knew Captain Gascoigne also knew he loved golf. Assistant Chief Thomas recollects shortly after returning from the National Governor's Conference on Hilton Head, the kidnapping of Sheriff A. Smith occurred, and Captain Gasquet led the SLED effort in assisting Lexington County Sheriff's Department in that case. He worked day and night, running leads and giving commands at the scene, as well as running back and forth to headquarters. Assistant Chief Thomas states that late one afternoon he pulled me aside. Remember, I was his scribe, and he said, "I'm exhausted and I have to go home. I can't come back out until tomorrow." He left a senior agent in charge in his absence. And during the night, the suspect called the family saying he was bringing their sherry home. Thomas states that as I listened to all the ideas about how to prepare for what might take place, it was easy to spot disagreements between command staffs from all the agencies that were on site. I placed a call to Captain Gasquet and explained what was happening, and he said, "Just don't think I can make it back out." However, it wasn't long before he drove up to Smith's house. Everyone took his lead and disagreement stopped. The suspect, later identified as Larry Gene Bell, never showed up at the home that night. Later, Captain Gasquet said when he started to leave his house on the night, his wife looked at him and said, "Well, Superman, you will have to go without your cape. I washed it and it's not dry." It was only a few weeks after the Smith case was solved and Larry Gene Bell was in custody that Captain Gasquet came in from his usual Saturday golf round that he had passed away. The outpouring of statewide condolences for the criminal justice profession was huge, and his funeral procession stretched for miles. The Highway Patrol had to even shut down a part of I-20. John Leon Gasquet Jr. graduated June 8, 1969 from the FBI National Academy, Session 65. He received the Order of Palmetto posthumously in 1986 from Governor Richard Riley. He was past president of the South Carolina Law Enforcement Officers Association, and he was named Outstanding Law Enforcement Officer in 1982 by the State Department of American Legion. He married Doris Altman Gasquet on June 10, 1954. They have a daughter, Cynthia Gasquet Chastain, husband Roy, a son, John Leon Gasquet III, his wife, Catherine. Cindy and Roy have two children, Stephanie Alexandra Chastain and Gregory Logan Chastain. We're glad to have them here with us today. He was a charter member of Westminster Presbyterian Church and served as an elder with distinction and served as the first board of deacons. The eloquent words delivered at his funeral mediation by the Reverend Todd B. Jones, his pastor at Westminster Presbyterian Church, are as follows. Leon also brought to life a spirit of love. To those who knew him well, Leon was a man with a tough exterior, but an incredibly tender heart. To outsiders, he appeared to be a tough cop, a workaholic, a strong and exceedingly able professional. But to his family, his friend, and his agents, he was a leader, a caring, loving man. Again, it is with great honor that I nominated Captain J. Leon Gasquet for the South Carolina Hall of Fame for meritorious service.
Don't get on this side. I'll step by there.
Thank you, Chief. Our next nominee was on part of the South Carolina Department of Corrections. We have Director Brian Sterling.
Afternoon, Brian Sterling, Director of South Carolina Department of Corrections. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Reverend Skidmore, and thank you, Director Woods, for having me, and Jackie for having all of us. Kenneth Ken D Mckeller. Where are you, Ken? There you are. Oh, saw you earlier. After graduating from Aiken High School in 1966, Ken Mckeller soon began his life of service and leadership, joining the United States Marine Corps. This included 13 combat tour months in Vietnam. Upon returning to the United States, but still on active status, Ken was assigned duty at the brig in Cherry Point Marine Corps Air Station in Cherry Point, North Carolina. Thus began his lifelong involvement in criminal justice, specifically with correction-related roles. After completing his military commitment and receiving an honorable discharge, Ken began working for the South Carolina Department of Corrections in 1970. I hadn't had a chance to look, but I would assume the population in 1970 was significantly less than it is in 2021. He was initially a corrections officer at SCDC's McDougal Youth Correctional Institution, where he remained until he decided to pursue his college education related to his career choice. Upon enrolling at Florida State, one of the very few schools in the United States which at the time provided a major in criminology, Ken received his Bachelor of Science in 1973. He remained there for postgraduate education and received his criminology master's degree in 1975, making him immediately eligible to put both his knowledge and his prior experience to good use. After returning home, Ken was selected to be warden of the Maximum Security Center, which at the time was SCDC's most secure facility for inmates who required separation from all others in the prison system. Ken fulfilled the unique responsibilities of that assignment and would become progression upon mobility with ever-increasing challenges. He was next warden at the Reception and Evaluation Center, where all the newly selected inmates were sent from each county jail within the state of South Carolina to be assessed, processed, and classified. From there, he became a ward of Manning Correctional Institute, which was a secure facility for younger adult inmates. After that, Ken was selected to be the warden of Kirkland Correctional Institute. At the time, it was one of the most modern adult prisons within the system. I can say it's no longer one of the more modern prisons and probably needs a lot of upgrades. Finally, he was chosen as warden of Central Correctional Institute, or infamous CCI, SCDC's the largest and most notorious facility that we had. From starting out as warden of Maximum Security Center through his completion of his tenure of warden of CCI, it took him only 15 years. I wonder how quickly you would have gone if you went to USC instead of FSU. Ken's performance at multiple facilities resulted in being elevated to serve for the first regional level and then statewide central office level. In 1989, he became the regional administrator for Midlands Correction Region, a role which made him an immediate supervisor of all wardens and institutions in that geographic area of South Carolina. He held that position for 5 years after he was selected to become director of Division of Security for the entire Department of Corrections. In his role, he was responsible for all emergency teams covering the whole state of South Carolina for providing direction, guidance, supporting pertaining to security equipment, training for all institutions, maintaining that duty for 9 years. Next, Ken became the Director of Classification and Compliance, which enabled him to modify and improve the ways in which our inmates assigned from the time they arrive at SCDC throughout their incarceration, and further enabled him to participate in audits of all prisons to review whether they were following agency policies and procedures as well as best practices. Ken's last title at SCDC was Operations Coordinator, a position which benefited the entire system by taking advantage of his experience and knowledge for all aspects of corrections. This path through the various regions and central office took place over the course of 16 years, ending with his retirement from state government in 2005. He was not done yet. Never one to be idle or satisfied with prior accomplishments, Ken next turned his attention to serving his country by applying his experience and knowledge to duties associated with America's fight against terrorism. From 2005 through the end of 2006, he was in Iraq as director of ICITAP prisons there. Then after a quote-unquote break, working in the private sector as a consultant, he went to Afghanistan from 2008 to 2010 as chief of team for the Corrections Systems Support Program. He maintained his involvement by serving as a subject matter expert for that program from 2010 to 2015. He subsequently continued as a subject matter expert with the Department of Homeland Security and ICE, and was used to assist the assessment and support for improving prison systems such as Rwanda and Saudi Arabia before settling down again. For Ken, that meant finding new ways to serve. He began conducting pro bono security audits for area churches to help keep the parishioners safe. In 2019, he became a member of the South Carolina Juvenile Parole Board, a position of great responsibility which he maintains without compensation. Ken received recognition and numerous awards in the past. Among them were SCDC Employee of the Year in 1985, President's Award for the South Carolina Correctional Association in 1992, SCDC Division Director of the Year in 1999, Friend of the Taxpayer Award in 2002, Male Employee of the Year for Lexington-Richland Chapter of the South Carolina State Employees Association in 2003 and 2004, Order of the Silver Crescent from the Governor of South Carolina in 2005. Additionally, he was given multiple awards for his national service completion, including one from leaders in other countries. Among Ken's organizational memberships are the Rotary International, Alston Wilkes, South Carolina Correctional Association, American Correctional Association, International Correctional Association, Prisons Association. He has been nationally certified as a Prison Rape Elimination Act auditor, an auditor and security counsel, consultant for the National Institute of Corrections, an instructor and leader for Kairos and Horizon Prison Ministries. He is also the unofficial historian of SCDC. We have some old pictures or things we don't necessarily know where they came from. We always call Ken up, and he's more than happy to come over and kind of tell us what exactly was going on at the time. One involved, I believe, Muhammad Ali coming to CCI back several years ago or several decades ago. We tried to identify what happened in that. Ken not only excelled during his distinguished career working for the South Carolina Department of Corrections, he continued after official retirement to demonstrate the same superior skills to carry out memorable actions which make him a deserving of the induction into the Hall of Fame based on his meritorious service. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Sterling. For our next presentation, on behalf of the South Carolina Department of Public Safety, I'd like to ask retired Highway Patrol Captain Art Felder to come up.
Good afternoon. When Director Woods called me and asked me to do this, first I was a little afraid, but I was honored and I was humbled to be able to present this award or recommendation or nomination for Lieutenant Randall Ford. These are not on my remarks. This is just me. I'll start that in a minute. But it's appropriate that it's done here because this is where I spent so much time with Lieutenant Ford. 32 years ago, myself and Director Woods was in my patrol class, and we came here as I was 23, as a young patrol trainee, and our class was Lieutenant Ford's first class as part of the training staff. Then after patrol school, I went to Horry County where Lieutenant Ford grew up, and I got to know his mom and some of his family members I met there. And then 10 years later, I was blessed to come back and be part of the staff. I came back in '99 as part of the training staff, but I wasn't an instructor in anything, which made me pretty useless until I went to class. But Lieutenant Ford, who was then Sergeant Ford, took me under his wing, and he mentored me. And he was not only a boss, but a friend, an encourager, a coach, all those things. And it happened in here that we did in-service training, and we had groups. Like I said, I wasn't an instructor, so I was the demo dummy for about 6 months. and Lieutenant Ford was the demonstrator. And one of the things that I learned during that time was, again, he took me in, taught me, and he said, I can use him. So what he would do right on this stage, about 3 nights a week for 50 troopers, he would demonstrate straight arm bar, iron wrist lock takedown, all these different moves. And what it taught me was these things work if you do them right. Because if he's ever put that hold on you, there's no getting out of it. But it built that confidence that these techniques were good. But what I saw was somebody that had a demanded excellence out of his students, but he was a trooper's trooper. He would teach them the right way and in a positive way. If they messed up, he didn't get down, he'd say, let's try it this way. So I learned so much about being a good instructor, being a good man from Lieutenant Ford. So that's my remarks. Now I'll read what's written here. There's other things I could say, but I'll save those. The South Carolina Department of Public Safety respectfully submits Lieutenant Randall M. Ford as the South Carolina Department of Public Safety's 2021 nominee for induction into the Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame for meritorious service. Throughout his notable career as a law enforcement professional, Lieutenant Ford distinguished himself as a public servant who always led by an example and with humility. Lieutenant Ford not only embodied impeccable character and self-discipline, he held those he trained to a similar high standard. These attributes gained the respect of his peers, trooper trainees, leaders within the Department of Public Safety, and Highway Patrol. Over the course of his 22-year tenure as an instructor at the Highway Patrol Training and Criminal Justice Academy, hundreds of cadets trained under his watchful eye. His goal was to ensure that they were professionally prepared to meet the challenges and demands of a law enforcement officer and the mission of making South Carolina highways safer. Lieutenant Ford's impact extended beyond law enforcement into 25 years of mentoring rising high school seniors. Each year, the American Legion would host the Nathan Wolf Cadet Academy, allowing students interested in law enforcement to see up close what was required. Lieutenant Ford applied his skills and knowledge to mentor and motivate these youth towards a career in law enforcement. And I saw this years later. We'd eat breakfast after we did PT together. Me and the lieutenant would sit there and eat breakfast, and usually maybe once a week, at least once a month, some trainee who was coming through for a sheriff's department or for a city police department would come up and say, "Hey, Lieutenant, you remember me? I went through the Nathan Wolf Academy 10 years ago or 6 years ago." And he said, "Yeah, I remember you." So you can't measure the impact he had on young people that had a desire to be in law enforcement. The very qualities that would come to define Lieutenant Ford's career began long before he wore a uniform. Lieutenant Ford grew up in the farm in the PD of South Carolina and describes himself even today as a country boy. His proud roots working in the tobacco fields of Greenville, South Carolina. The work was challenging and physically demanding, and he stayed physically fit through the strenuous labor of helping his family maintain crops. This work ethic, instilled in him at a young age, became the hallmark of his leadership style and influenced what he expected of those trainees under his guidance and those instructors who fell under his command at Highway Patrol training. Ford said his time working in the tobacco fields not only impressed upon him the importance of good physical fitness and solid work ethic, it taught him relational skills such as how to talk to people and how to work together for a common goal. His mother, Mary Catherine Ford, also made a lasting impact on Lieutenant Ford by modeling the example of hard work. Lieutenant Ford remembers that during the days of working in the tobacco field, that his mother was usually the first in the field and the last one out of the field, and in doing all that, she still maintained a household and cooked good country food for him. After graduating from Greenville High School, Lieutenant Ford attended Georgia Southern University, and his introduction into law enforcement came through his time as a dispatcher for the South Carolina Highway Patrol in Conway. He served in this capacity from 1973 to 1975 before joining the City of Conway Police Department, where he worked as a police officer until 1976. He joined the Highway Patrol in September 1976. The early years of his Highway Patrol career were primarily in Charleston County. In 1989, that day that being the director came here, he was promoted to South Carolina Highway Patrol Training Unit, where he spent the bulk of his career from 1989 2007. He retired from the Highway Patrol from defensive tactics to physical fitness. Lieutenant Ford instructed hundreds of trainees throughout the years and ensured the graduates were well prepared to take those skills from the highway into the communities around the state. He was certified to teach firearms, OC, driving, CPR, defensive tactics, ground defense, and master fitness. In 1997, his efforts in the training cadets were honored when he was named the South Carolina Trooper of the Year for the Highway Patrol training, receiving the honor from Governor David Beasley. After his retirement from the Highway Patrol, Lieutenant joined the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy as an instructor in defensive tactics and physical training. He came back to DPS for his final career assignment. He joined the Bureau of Protective Services in 2013, working in the Appellate Court Division until his official retirement in 2015. The colleagues who served alongside Lieutenant Ford characterized his leadership as someone who never asked his cadets to do something that he would not do. Lieutenant Ford wisely recognized the importance of physical fitness as troopers transitioned from the relative safety of the training environment to the unpredictable nature of policing on the state's highways. Ford often counseled recruits that being physically prepared can be critical to real-life situations, such as a foot pursuit, struggle with a suspect, or most seriously, a life-threatening incident such as a shooting. Lieutenant Ford was probably best known for his early morning physical training sessions that put recruits to the test, with Lieutenant Ford leading the pack. He was a member of the Japanese Karate Association. He drew heavily on this background in martial arts. Those attributes influenced the high standards by which he held himself, as well as the recruits when it came to physical training. Lieutenant Ford was focused in his determination to make South Carolina roads safer by ensuring that law enforcement cadets were highly trained, fit, and ready to serve and protect the citizens of South Carolina. When recruits begin highway patrol training, they have a relatively short time to acquire a diversity of skills needed to become an effective law enforcement officer. Lieutenant Ford always strived to ensure their time in highway patrol training was wisely spent. He described those entering the academy as a ball of clay, and he took great pride in helping to mold them into professionally trained and prepared law enforcement officers. In seeking to capture the contributions to the South Carolina law enforcement, a quote from University of Alabama's legendary coach Paul Bear Bryant applies. Bryant said, "If anything goes bad, I did it. If it goes semi-good, we did it. If it goes really good, you did it." This captured Lieutenant Ford's style as a servant leader. Lieutenant Ford recognized the importance of teamwork and letting others shine while he stepped back from the spotlight. Lieutenant Ford's quiet influence instilled a drive of excellence in those lives he touched, and no doubt helped save many lives on our roadways as a result. While Lieutenant Ford has retired from active law enforcement, his imprint on law enforcement training remains in those who continue to serve and lead recruits. He has recently become active in meeting with other retirees and reminiscing about their time serving our state. He and his wife, Jeanette, continue their commitment to good health and physical fitness, working out together at an athletic club in their neighborhood. They also enjoy traveling internationally. For as many attributes as a consummate law enforcement professional, his investment in placing hundreds of highly trained professional law enforcement officers into our communities, and for his commitment to a career in public service, it's our distinct pleasure to nominate Lieutenant Randall Ford for this prestigious honor. mask.
I don't know. I can't keep up with mine. Thank you, Art. Our next presentation on behalf of the South Carolina Sheriff's Association, we'll have Sheriff Lee Foster from Newberry County.
Make sure I don't read the intro that you did. Got the right one out. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be able to present the South Carolina Sheriff's Association's nominee for meritorious service on behalf of Sheriff Mike Crenshaw of Oconee County and Jared Bruder, the Executive Director of the South Carolina Sheriff's Association. It is our pleasure that we present retired Sheriff James Edward Singleton our nomination and the award. Before I get into the body of his work, it's an interesting thing that Sheriff Crenshaw told me that today in the audience we have former Sheriff Earl Holcomb, who was sheriff when I took office. Then we have Sheriff Singleton here, and we also have Sheriff Mike Crenshaw, which represents 41 years of, as Andy Griffith called, sheriffing in Oconee County. Now, if I read, pardon me, if I read the entire bio of Sheriff Singleton, we would still be here at dark, and everybody knows you got to get home in Oconee County before dark because you can't ride on the roads. So we're going to get them through Newberry County and home in plenty of time. But I'm going to begin with what's the most important thing to Sheriff Singleton is family. He's been married to his wife Janice for 46 years. He has 4 children and 5 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren. At the age of 16, he left school and helped to provide for his younger brothers and sisters. At the age of 17, he volunteered for the draft and entered the Army, and then volunteered for service in Vietnam. And thank you for your service in that conflict. Upon returning from Vietnam and exiting the military, Sheriff Singleton used the GI Bill to attend Tri-County Technical College, where he earned his GED, and then he has earned his associate degree in criminal justice. In 1973, Sheriff Singleton started his career in law enforcement that spanned until December the 31st of 2012. During his career, Sheriff Singleton earned the respect of all the fellow officers, judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and the public that he served. Sheriff Singleton has been one of the most influential people in Oconee County and around the state. In 1980, Sheriff Singleton was appointed by Sheriff Earl Holcomb to be the chief deputy. Sheriff Singleton served in that post for 12 years. Upon Sheriff Holcomb's retirement, Sheriff Singleton was elected sheriff of Oconee County in 1993. He took office on January 1st, 1994, and was elected to 5 consecutive terms, which equates to 20 years. This made Sheriff Singleton the longest serving sheriff in the history of Oconee County. In 2008, Sheriff Singleton was elected to be the president of the South Carolina Sheriff's Association, and he became Sheriff of the Year. One thing Sheriff Singleton recognized when he took office is that he had several things that needed to be done. And one of his first orders of business was to increase the number of sworn officers to better serve the people of Oconee County. At the time, there were only 33 sworn deputies. Officers and personnel were steadily added over the years, and the number of certified personnel now stands at 85. During this period, the quality and quantity of equipment issued to the Sheriff's Office has improved dramatically. This includes vehicles, radios, firearms, ballistic vests, and tasers. Sheriff Singleton has made sure the department took advantage of every major source of revenue and every avenue of improvement using various grants, state surplus, 1033 program, and much more, along with working with county council to improve the sheriff's office. Now, I'm just going to highlight some of the things that he did in his career that still in service today. He formed the first SWAT team, and it was used, it better organized, increased training. He also established an aviation unit that helped in the upstate. Devised a K-9 program and had 4 full-time patrol K-9s that were trained in various aspects of law enforcement, including bombs, tracking, and cadaver work. He also had 2 bloodhounds that were used for human tracking. Oconee County is known for its lakes and waterways, and he saw the need to have a marine patrol and a dive team. The dive team was utilized to search following drownings and for evidence, used not only in Oconee County but in the upstate. He also came up with a traffic unit, school resource officers in the local schools before it was mandated. He had several other divisions that he specialized was warrants division, a criminal domestic violence investigator, full-time training officer, and an accreditation officer, as well as an honor guard. Sheriff Singleton worked tirelessly for the people of Oconee County, and if it wasn't enough to be the sheriff, he also oversaw the duties of the Oconee County Detention Center and the Animal Control Department, where he improved